Well, welcome to the Lightning Talks 2 session, our final session for the day. My name is Nicole Schultz, and I'm a librarian for geospatial and numeric data at the University of Michigan. I'll be aided today by Karen Majewitz at the University of Minnesota. I'm going to introduce each speaker before their presentation. We'll have Q&A at the end, but do feel free to start putting those questions in as soon as you have them. And if you can, put in the name of the person you're directing it to. You can use that chat feature for technical problems if you have any, and let's just go ahead and get started. Our first presenter is Ananya Uddanti. Ananya is a second-year undergraduate at Brown University, majoring in spatial epidemiology. As part of the program in liberal medical education, she will matriculate to Warren Alpert Medical School and hopes to continue applying spatial methods to health data. Ananya, you can go ahead and begin your presentation.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'll be presenting my project on how the construction and continued presence of Interstate 630 in Little Rock, Arkansas has shaped the racial composition and educational attainment in Pulaski County. My broader argument here is that highways in the United States have often functioned not as neutral transportation assets, but rather tools that produce and preserve racial inequality in urban spaces. Next slide, please. The goal of this project was to investigate whether neighborhoods adjacent to Interstate 630 continue to exhibit distinctive patterns of racial and educational stratification into the 21st century. Across the United States, highway construction has disproportionately targeted Black neighborhoods. In cities such as Syracuse, Detroit, and St. Paul, interstate development has displaced residents, accelerated suburban flight, and fragmented local economies. Urban demographers often argue that highways actively reproduce patterns of racial concentration over time by creating physical and political boundaries. The purpose of this analysis was to examine whether Little Rock reflects this larger national pattern. Next slide, please. So for some historical background, before Interstate 630 was built, West 9th Street used to exist there. So West 9th Street was one of the most significant Black commercial and civic corridors in Arkansas. It was home to Black-owned businesses, churches, entertainment venues, and other community institutions during the segregation era. It represented economic autonomy, and social infrastructure for the Black community. The construction of Interstate 630 in the 1960s disrupted this, so there was a loss of Black-owned wealth and forced residential displacement. Next slide, please. To study the demographics, I utilized tract-level census data from the National Historic Geographic Information System. And so because tract-level data did not exist in a very clean manner for the pre-interstate period, in a way that would be directly comparable to current data, I did not attempt to reconstruct the conditions from before the interstate construction. So instead, I was exploring the present-day spatial distribution of demographics in relation to the interstate from 1960s to now. So some of the variables I looked at included total population density, percentage of African American individuals, and owners of households, as well as educational attainment. And then I examined the spatial change and clustering of these over time. So something to note here is that the earlier census years, so 1960s through 1990s, are not standardized to the 2010 tract boundaries that are provided by the US Census Bureau. So those comparisons should be interpreted a little bit more carefully. And then another thing that I really wanted to note was that this method and this analysis as a whole is not trying to claim causal identification by saying the highway caused these racial patterns, but rather this project is aiming to understand whether Little Rock displays patterns that are consistent with the racial distributions that we see in other cities with highways such as Interstate 630. Next slide, please. So by looking at the total population density over time, we can see how neighborhoods changed as a city developed since the 1960s. And we can see that the population concentration shifted with suburbanization and urban redevelopment, and we ultimately see urban sprawl. Next slide, please. So these maps show the actual percentage of African American individuals per capita or per census tract. And so we can see that these are some of the most strongest findings of this analysis. We can see that across the decades, census tracts that are to the south of Interstate 630 which for reference, Interstate 630 is the thin black line across all of these maps. And so we can see that the census tracts that are south of that consistently show a much higher percentage of African American residents over time, while the tracts north of it indicate a non-African American population majority. Next slide, please. And to confirm this pattern, I also looked at African American owned households to confirm these. And so we can see again that the same general pattern appears, with neighborhoods south of the highway showing a higher proportion of Black home ownership. Yes, next slide, please. Similarly, I also mapped the percentage of residents with a bachelor's degree or higher. And so here we can see that the census tracts north of the interstate show higher educational attainment, while the tracts south of the highway show lower levels. So this suggests that the highway boundary corresponds not only with racial distribution, but also educational attainment, which, as education is often correlated with income and health outcomes, these differences and their relationship to the interstate matter beyond the map itself. Next slide, please. So going back to the percentage of African American individuals per census tracts, this map displays the global Moran 1 analysis results, where we can see that the dispersing of the Black population in Little Rock, specifically Pulaski County, it's not a random pattern. In fact, the p-value was less than 0.0001. And so these were significantly clustered. So the map on the left demonstrates the change in proportion of African American individuals per census tract, and we can see the clustering to the right. Yeah, so next slide, please. So in conclusion, this project does show that the Interstate 630 has acted as a visible and durable boundary of racial composition in Little Rock. Census tracts south of the highway consistently display higher percentage of African American individuals as well as home ownership, while census tracts north of the highway display higher educational attainment. Next slide, please. So something to note here is just that the implications of this work is just a reminder that urban planning decisions often leave long-term spatial consequences in terms of racial distribution, demographics, educational attainment, and so much more. And it's just important to note this. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Ananya. I'm now going to introduce our next speaker, Emma Jones. Emma is a third-year student at the University of Minnesota. She is majoring in anthropology with a minor in GIS. She currently works for the Department of Geography, Environment, and Society. You can go ahead and start your presentation, Emma.
First, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being here. It's an honor to be able to present at this conference. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the Mississippi River Gorge Project. So if you want to go to the next section. So project background, the Mississippi River Gorge Project was introduced in 2026 by the Friends of the Mississippi River. The project extent is they want to evaluate the removal of two dams in Minneapolis. So the first one is the St. Anthony Falls Lock and Dam, which is right by downtown Minneapolis, and then Lock and Dam number 1. The plan wants to evaluate the economic benefits, the recreational benefits, potential habitat restoration in the area, the impact on water qualities. And they've kind of worked in tandem with St. Anthony Falls Lab. St. Anthony Falls Lab had a proposal in 2024 that's studying sediment transport downstream of the Mississippi River. And so if you want to scroll down the next section, this will be the project extent. So number 1, this is the northern extent of the project. This is Nicollet Island. Like I said, this is right by downtown Minneapolis. It's a very beautiful area if you've never been. I highly recommend visiting Nicollet Island, the region. It's a very, very scenic area. Number 2, this is the St. Anthony Falls Lock and Dam. This is the first dam mentioned in the project. And this is literally just south of Nicollet Island. So it's in the very beautiful region. Stone Arch Bridge is right next to it as well. The third one, this will be Lock and Dam number 1. So for my work, this has been the dam that I've been focusing on, but this is the second dam mentioned in the project proposal. And then number 4, This is the end of the project extent. So this is Pike Island, which is just west of Fort Snelling in Minneapolis. So next section. St. Anthony Falls Lab and U-Spatial. So St. Anthony Falls Lab were the initial, they had the initial proposal in 2024 that's studying sediment transport. They're looking at how fast it's traveling downstream, erosion hotspots, those kinds of areas within sediment transport. And so they've worked really closely with Friends of the Mississippi River to create the new 2026 proposal. And so U-Spatial, who I've been collaborating with on this project, has been gathering current bathymetry data, sounding data for the river. And so my area of expertise has kind of been the historical aspect, while U-Spatial has been more of the current aspect. So we're gonna go to the next section. So my role as a student, I joined this project in February of 2026. So I've been working with U-Spatial for a couple of months now. We've been trying to gather information about the original path of the Mississippi River and the original elevation of the Mississippi River. So prior to any dredging, prior to any construction of dams, that's kind of been my area of expertise. So my process has been georeferencing historical maps of the region. So I began with the Mississippi River Commission maps. There's a couple dates on them. The first date is 1895, but there's another date that says 1906. So we're not 100% sure of where that data is coming from, but that was the first set of maps that I georeferenced. And then the second set, which has been the focus for the last 2 months of the project, have been what we call the Allen maps. So the Allen maps were created by the Army Corps of Engineers by a guy named Major Charles J. Allen. So these were created in 1887, and they have sounding data, they have elevation data, they have contour lines, so much rich data to collect from these about the original path, the original elevation of the Mississippi River. So my job has been to georeference these maps to match the current path about as well as I can get them, and to digitize, the soundings, elevation markers, the contour lines. There's river channels that I've been digitizing as well. These give the best representation of the Mississippi River. And so for U-Spatial and for SAFL, St. Anthony Falls Labs, they are trying to create a reduced scale model of the Mississippi River to analyze the sediment transport. So my data would be for their physical model. So this is going to contribute to seeing how the sediment moves in the original river. So if the dams do potentially get removed, we know the impact. We know if there's hazards, if there's setbacks with this, if there's drawbacks, if there's benefits. And so I'm nearly complete with the project. On my end, I've done about 2/3 of the digitizing that I need to do. The Allen maps are divided into 3 sheets. And so it stretches all the way from Nicollet Island to downtown St. Paul. So for communication's sake, I've been digitizing all the way to St. Paul past the project extent, but the actual physical scale model will be from Nicollet Island to Pike Island. So next section. This is the digitization progress I've had. So if you want to zoom in to any area on the map. So these are the sounding points. And so I have symbolized them based on their depth. So the darker points are deeper points. And so we have the date they were recorded, the St. Paul gauge reading of the day they were recorded, the time they were recorded, the depth of the river at that point. On this map alone, there's over 5,000 sounding points. So we've gotten some really rich data from these maps, which is amazing. And it's been such a learning opportunity for me to be able to do this. So next section, this is a portion of the Allen map. So these maps are, I think, 9 feet long in person. We have one printed out at U-Spatial, and it's been amazing to see in person. And so this kind of just gives you a little insight into the amount of data that's on these maps and the amount that you have to digitize to extract this data. And it's been a very amazing opportunity to be able to do this. So my last section, I just have a bunch of people to thank because this has just been an amazing opportunity. So Pete and Sarah at USpatial, I think Pete's watching right now, so hello to you. Thank you for your help on this. Thank you for allowing me to work on this project. It's been an amazing opportunity. Synergy Falls Lab, amazing collaborators, Matthew, Jeffrey, Dick, and Matt. Again, they've all been amazing. John Affinson, who's a Mississippi River historian. I think he knows more about the Mississippi River than any person on the planet. Very amazing guy to work with. And my own Department of Geography, Environment, and Society at the College of Liberal Arts here at the University of Minnesota for allowing me to be a part of this amazing project. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Emma, for your presentation. As a reminder, Q&A will be handled at the end of our 4 lightning talks. So go ahead and do put your questions in as you have them. And I didn't mention that this is an all undergraduate slate of lightning talks. We're really excited to have had so many strong proposals. We anonymized our proposals going into the process, and we had such a fantastic bunch of folks, and we just ended up clustering them like this for you all. Okay, so our next presenter is Ava Mitchell-Vargas from the University of Oregon. Ava is a senior at the University of Oregon studying human physiology. This project is her honors thesis, which aims to bring attention to a public health issue through an intersectional lens. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. This is my first conference ever, and I had never even worked with GIS prior to November, so I'm really excited to be here. My thesis aims in mapping diabetes risk and organophosphate pesticide usage in the San Joaquin Valley, California. And I seek to highlight the disproportionate health risk that the Latino farm worker community faces due to the exposure of pesticides in the agricultural industry. Next slide, please. So I chose to focus on organophosphate pesticides, which are some of the most commonly used in the United States. And I specifically am focusing on Kern, Tulare, and Fresno counties within the San Joaquin Valley. I essentially, organophosphate pesticides are classified as a nerve gas or nerve agent, similar to sarin nerve gas. They're in the same kind of chemical family. And they act by inhibiting the breakdown of an essential excitatory neurotransmitter, leading to long-term health impacts like diabetes or cancer. I'm focusing on diabetes for my project, and I have chosen to work with just a subset of these pesticides. Application in fields increases the risk that farm workers face and can lead to exposure through the air, water, and skin, depending on the method of application. And farm workers are, the majority of them identify as Hispanic or Latino, meaning that this population bears the burden of exposure and risk. Next slide, please. So for my sources, I extracted data from the California Pesticide Information Portal, and I classified it based on just to give a couple of examples of pesticide: acephate, dimethylate, and malathion. All of them are organophosphate pesticides, and they're the most commonly used within the United States and across the world. I joined this data in a shapefile using the COMTRS, which indicates county, meridian, township, range, and section, which in simple terms is just like a 1 by 1 square mile area, so very granular. And for my census data, it was extracted from the Census Bureau, and the diabetes incidence rate was added from the CDC Places survey. Next slide, please. So this is my first map here. I'm showing the data of the organophosphate pesticide usage within those counties, and this is pounds of product applied in 2023. Just a quick reminder that every single one of those dots is a 1 by 1 square mile area of application. We have our legend here, and I just want to highlight that the top number is 17,702 pounds of organophosphate pesticides applied in 2023. And I just wanted to highlight that. So next slide. So this is a zoom in on that. This is a 1 by 1 square mile area in Fresno County where they applied 17,702 pounds of pesticides in 2023. They went over it 4 times, 4 applications, and in total, they covered 608 acres of land. Like if you spend all out, that's 608 acres of land, which is comparable to covering almost all of Central Park in New York. Um, that's like similar acreage. And next slide. Thank you. Here we're bringing in the census tract. This is, it shows a comparison between the percentage of Latino Hispanic farm workers compared to the total population. And in some places, it up to 45% of the total population works in agriculture and identifies Hispanic or Latino. So clearly we can see that this population bears a disproportionate health risk based on where they live and their identity and the industry in which they work. Next slide, please. This shows the intersection between the organophosphate pesticide usage, again, in pounds of product applied, and the diabetes incidence in these communities above the national average, which is 12%. So all of these places, whether it's showing yellow, orange, or red, all of it is above the national average, going up to almost 24%, especially in some of these areas where we see high pesticide application. One thing I forgot to mention is this is a correlation study. I cannot prove that these pesticides are causing diabetes in these communities, but they do bear a disproportionate risk factor because of the application of this pesticide, which is a nerve agent. Next slide, please. So I'm not quite done with my project yet. And so I'm hoping to finish up my web app, which is going to be available in ArcGIS Online, where you'll be able to explore a lot of these different factors and layer all the variables on top of each other, toggle layers on and off, and then zoom in and out on individual data points. And I'm also hoping to add a buffer for pesticide drift, just to see if I can expand and add more of like an area of exposure risk outside of what I've already done. As of like my thesis, I think I'm trying to show like that clear story that these pesticide use is correlated with increased rates of diabetes within these communities. And because of that, they bear a disproportionate health risk. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ava. Go ahead and put those questions you have in the Q&A. And I'm going to introduce our final speakers for this session, Anna Dorson and Allison Dinwiddie from Purdue University. Anna Dorson is a sophomore at Purdue University studying wildlife, and Allison Dinwiddie is a senior at Purdue University studying history. They are both undergraduate researchers and are part of a broader research team called Project Oceanic, which analyzes Pacific Island communities and their sailing networks. You can go ahead and start your presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Dinwiddie, and this is Anna Dorson. Our project is titled Modeling Disasters, Visualizing the Impact of the 1907 Typhoon on Micronesian Communities. Our project used geospatial technology to map the 1907 typhoon on our project area. This type of research is important as it allows us to better visualize the path of the storm and the islanders' responses to make conclusions about how they expressed agency in times of disaster. Next slide, please. So illustrated here are the YAP states, and this is our main area of study. The YAP states are an archipelago, which is located in the Western Pacific Ocean, and they have been inhabited since approximately 2100 BC, and they're located north of Australia and east of Indonesia, and they consist of roughly 4 main islands, 19 outer islands, and 134 atolls.
And so the individual land masses of this archipelago have always been connected through trade and cultural networks, which were disturbed in the 20th century by colonial occupation. Next slide, please. So who are the Yapese Rumetal people? They're an ethnic group that inhabited the Yap states and are illustrated in these images here, which are from the Micronesian Area Research Center. These people formed kinship networks throughout their islands, which were on the previous slide, and they would support each other in times of disaster, specifically typhoons and famines that would occur within these island regions. They would sail between these islands on single outrigger canoes to provide this relief. Next slide, please. So specifically, our project is focusing on the 1907 typhoon, and this typhoon impacted the social networks of our project area and the Yap states, and it significantly reduced the island's populations. It hit our study area between March 26th and March 30th of 1907, and it caused destruction and loss of life. We specifically chose this typhoon because it's particularly well documented for this time. And this is because the Germans that ruled the islands for colonial power during this time, and they were governing the islands during this time. Yeah. Next slide, please. So we mentioned before how these island systems were connected. One of the main systems of connection that they had was called a sawway system. So they would use the system with these sea lanes, which we have highlighted here between the islands. Some of the sea lanes actually had specific names to them as well, which you can see in the yellow. Those are the names. These were also sailing routes, so sea lanes, sailing routes. And they would use these to provide relief. And this was one of the main systems that was disturbed in the 1907 typhoon during this time of German colonization because they weren't able to draw on their original kinship networks when they were under the control of the Germans. However, our research studies, which we'll get into in a second, showed how these islanders showed agency regardless in times of disaster, despite this colonial oppression. Next slide, please. So you can wait to start the video for a second, but basically what our research focused on and how we used GIS to do this was we created a story map using our specific project area, and we wanted to put pop-ups on each of the islands. And so when you hover over them, it's going to have a little pop-up that comes up, and we use primary source data to be able to put in information on there of like descriptions of when the island was hit and also different results, the strength and the sources of each of the islands. So you can press play now. So you'll see on there, it has the title of the island, the description, the strength, and the sources. On different islands, there'll be like some that have more information, some will have less, depending on, so this one's like has similar information, just depending on what was available through the primary source data. So this one also had response and some statistics about like fatalities and stuff like this. This one was able to actually have some primary source data of like pictures given by the community. But so this story map is very beneficial because it allows us to combine both quantitative and qualitative data in the form of statistics from islanders' accounts and images. The map can also be used as a teaching tool to instruct in classrooms and community members about the typhoon. So by constructing the ArcGIS story map, we were able to determine that even though they were under colonial rule, the islanders were able to express agency because they were significantly more prepared to handle and respond to that typhoon than the Germans were. So furthermore, almost all of them, if they were transported off of their home islands, eventually returned, and this also demonstrated agency. Next slide. Yeah, next slide, please. We just wanted to say a quick thank you to the GIS conference for having us, and also to recognize some of our sponsors. So as we mentioned when we started, we're a part of a larger team called Project Oceanic, which is funded through a breakthrough award from the John Martinson Honors College, at Purdue University. Our principal investigator is Dr. Katie Jarrell, and we have the members of our product oceanic team listed there, as well as other collaborators and advisors that have worked with us on this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. That concludes our presentations, but we do have time for a few questions. We have one so far in the Q&A module. I'm going to go ahead and ask that. This one is directed to Ava. It says organophosphates and diabetes mellitus, I think that's what the DM stands for there, is not the standard association. What made you look into that?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So as I was like doing my background research for this project, I wanted it to be something important and impactful that a lot of the population can be affected by, and isn't necessarily like so granular as some of the cancers I was looking at. And so as I was doing my research, I found that like the way that the nerve agent acts inhibits acetylcholinesterase, which is the enzyme, but that's like the jargony term. Um, and it can increase insulin resistance, which can lead to diabetes or high blood pressure or a lot of these different things. Um, Frankly, I wanted to do multiple like I wanted to do like multiple different kinds of cancers and diabetes and like a couple of other different things just to see like how it affects the whole body. But this is an undergraduate thesis and I just didn't have the time. So I just chose whichever one that I seemed to find like the most resources with, and it was diabetes.
Thanks so much, Ava. Yeah, so many times our dreams for our research are bigger than what's practical. And also, I'm often cautioning people like, we don't have to show everything on one map. Sticking to some things preliminarily can be a great way to get started. And also, what is their data for, right? That's what this is all about. Let's see. I think we have another question. Oh, this one's for Ananya. Do you have plans to continue this work, looking into this using other geographies?
Yes, absolutely. I think something that's very clear in the literature is that this pattern of racial distribution due to highway construction is very apparent across multiple urban cities. And so it would be interesting to understand if that's a pattern that's specific to larger highways or even other forms of transportation construction. And specifically, I'm looking to continue the work in particular to Little Rock, examining other demographic variables as well.
Thanks, Ananya. And then a question or kind of remark for Ananya that between your talk and then the earlier one by Gabrielle on redlining and Summer's presentation this morning on Ohio ghost neighborhoods, it's been fascinating to see so much about city development. So thanks for that. All right, I'm going to leave things open for just another little bit here. And I think that's going to be it. Thank you again so much for being here and to all of our attendees. And I'm going to turn things back to Colleen to wrap us all up. So we'll be ending this lightning talks. Thanks.